Welcome to According to Sam, folks. This is episode 254. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Got a great show for you today. We're going to pick up where we left off in the last few podcasts. We've been talking about the financial crises. The Great Recession is what they called it, that took place in happened in 2008. During the transition from the Bush administration to the Obama administration. And I was commenting in my last podcast how great the timing was of me doing these podcasts this week. And we'll probably pick this up again on Monday because Obama is out on the campaign trail right now. And we're going to focus a lot on Obama's role in that financial crisis and the things that he said and was campaigning on in 2008 in the midst of this crisis and how he was going to bring the change. We've been talking about the Bush-Clinton dynasty, and I've been telling you guys that all three of these presidents represent the same dynasty, the same agenda, the same everything that the establishment seeks to achieve, the global establishment, these guys represented it. And George Bush's father was the patriarch. This doesn't come from me. If you don't remember, if you haven't watched the podcast where I played the clip of Milton Friedman, he's the one who calls this the Bush-Clinton dynasty, or he says that we're in the Bush-Clinton years, is what Milton Friedman said. And I'm the one who dubbed it the Bush-Clinton dynasty. But the patriarch is Bush's father, George H.W. Bush. He begins the dynasty, and the dynasty continues on to this day with the Joe Biden administration. And they want to continue the dynasty with the Kamala Harris administration. This dynasty was interrupted for 4 years by Donald Trump. Donald Trump was president for 4 years. And what they're telling you is that all of your problems, the economic problems, the division, the problems with the border, even they're blaming climate change and the weather events on Donald Trump. He's responsible for everything his 4 years and not these guys. And I've been telling you how ridiculous that is, and trying to use the financial crisis in 2008 to explain the role that each one of these presidents played in that crisis. I'm trying to explain to you that there was no change with Obama when he ran on change in 2008. That was the centerpiece of his campaign in 2008, was to change direction from the Bush years, not only from the Bush years, from the Clinton years as well, because he ran against Bill Clinton's wife in the primary that year and beat her in the primary, and then went on to defeat John McCain in the general. But his entire campaign was change, that I am the change agent. And I'm using the financial crisis as one example to show how this guy was not change. He was no change at all. And he was in PA yesterday campaigning for Kamala Harris because now she's running on change. And I want you to understand that the same change you got from Obama, and I voted for Obama in 2008. I fell for this change con. So I'm trying to tell you people, especially you young people, you Gen Zers and you Gen millennials that were not old enough to remember this con job this guy ran on the nation. I'm going to break it all down for you today using the financial crisis in 2008. But I want you to understand that the same change that you got from Obama, which was no change, you can expect the same change from Kamala Harris, who is also running on change. And she's, she's not shy about it. She's been doing interviews all this week. We're going to play some clips from the interviews. She's not shy about that. She's not bringing any change. This was Obama yesterday in Pennsylvania. Let's take a listen to what Obama says here. It's disgusting.
I've already heard tonight, this election's going to be tight. Because there are a lot of Americans who are still struggling out there.
Why are so many Americans still struggling out here, Obama? You were president for 8 years. You ran on change. You ran on change. What was that? So it's 2004. So you ran in 2008. That's 16 years ago, bro. You served for 8 years, 2 terms. Why are so many people out here struggling? And think about that question as we get into today's podcast. He says that this election is going to be close because there's a lot of people out there still hurting. Hold on to that.
It's going to be tight. Because there are a lot of Americans who are still struggling out there. They're still striving to make life better for themselves, for their families, and for their kids.
So that's why the election is going to be tight. That's why the election is going to be tight, because there's a lot of people out here still struggling and still, struggling to make things work out for their families and for their kids. That's why the election is going to be tight, is what he says. Why would that make the election tight? Because people are out there struggling.
Still struggling out there. They're still striving to make life better for themselves, for their families, and for their kids. And let's face it, as a country, we've been through a lot these last few years. We had a historic pandemic wreaking havoc on communities and businesses. Disruptions from the pandemic then caused prices to spike.
That's a lie. That's not what caused prices to spike. What caused prices to spike was the $2 trillion that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris created out of thin air and without a single Republican vote as soon as they got into office. 3 months later, inflation went to 9%. So that's what caused the prices to rise.
Wreaking havoc on communities and businesses. Disruptions from the pandemic then caused prices to spike, and that put a strain on family budgets. And in many ways, it's felt like the aspirations of working people have taken a back seat to the priorities of the rich and the powerful.
To the priorities of the rich and the powerful. He looks like, because people are still struggling 16 years after he ran on hope and change, people are still struggling. So that's going to make the election tight. That's what's making the election tight, because people seems like that their hopes and desires have taken a backseat, and Wall Street was put over Main Street. I don't know if he says that here, but that's going to be a common theme as we get into today's podcast. Wall Street versus Main Street. Okay, let's listen to him again. Does he say that here?
Have taken a back seat to the priorities of the rich and the powerful.
Oh, no. So taking the priorities. So let's listen again.
And that put a strain on family budgets. And in many ways, it's felt like the aspirations of working people have taken a back seat to the priorities of the rich and the powerful.
The aspirations of working people have taken a back seat to the aspirations of the rich and the powerful. It doesn't say Wall Street versus Main Street here. I wish I wouldn't have said that, because I wanted him to be the first person to say it. But you're going to hear a lot of clips of him making the distinction today in this podcast between Wall Street and Main Street. Wall Street and Main Street. And it's a distinction that he made in 2008 in the midst of the Great Recession, in the midst of the subprime crisis, the banking crisis, where we had to bail out the banks. He is making a distinction between Wall Street and Main Street. Here, he makes the distinction between workers and the rich and the powerful. Same thing. It's the same distinction.
So I get it, why people are looking to shake things up.
Shake things up.
I am the hopey-changey guy.
I am the hopey-changey guy. That's the so disgusting what this guy just did right there. He says, I get it why people want to shake things up. What does shake things up mean? Change. Change. That's what shake things up. I get it that people want to shake things up. And then he says, I am the hopey-changey guy. Like, playing off the fact that you ran on hope and change. You sold people hope and change in 2008, and he's making a joke about it. He's like, I get it that people still want change 16 years later, and you're looking to shake things up because, remember, I sold you this con job about hopey change back in 2008. Listen to this again.
So I get it, why people are looking to shake things up. I mean, I am the hopey changey guy. So I understand.
Everybody laughs, or not everybody, but you hear a few people laughing, ha, ha, ha. No, there's nothing funny about that. A lot of people believed in the hope and change that Obama was selling in 2008. I was one of them. A lot of people believe in the hopey, changey stuff that he sold us in 2008. Out of all of these, and each one of these men had a role to do, a role in what in where America is today, and America's not in a good place today. But out of all of these men, the one that I resent the most, and I resent all of them, the one that I resent the most is Obama, because the way that he sold us the hope and change, like he was going to really come in and make a difference, is what he sold us. Now he's joking. I get why 16 years later you still want to shake things up and change things. I am the hopey change guy, is what he says.
To the priorities of the rich and the powerful. So I get it, why people are looking to shake things up. I mean, I am the hopey changey guy. So I understand people feeling frustrated and feeling we can do better. What I cannot understand is why anybody would think that Donald Trump will shake things up in a way that is good for you, Pennsylvania. I don't understand that.
Well, Donald Trump is running on a platform that is totally different from the Bush-Clinton dynasty. Donald Trump is getting shot at, bro. Nobody ever shot at you. Nobody ever shot at you because you didn't represent any change to the status quo, to the establishment. You were never a threat to them. Watch what he says right here.
Because there is absolutely no evidence that this man thinks about anybody but himself.
That's ridiculous.
I've said it before. Donald Trump is a 78-year-old billionaire who has not stopped whining about his problems since he rode down his golden escalator 9 years ago.
All right, so listen to what he says here. He admits that Donald Trump is a billionaire, which Donald Trump is, very wealthy man. He's been wealthy for years, 80 years old. And then he's trying to make the case that Donald Trump doesn't care about anybody but himself. If Donald Trump didn't care about anybody but himself, why is he even doing this? Why is he even wasting time getting shot at, getting dragged through the mud by the media and his name, going to the court cases, being indicted just because of who he is, and throwing all these indictments at everything this guy's been through? He's a billionaire, 79-year-old billionaire, like you said, Obama. If he didn't care about anybody but himself, why is he doing this? Why is he doing this? He's doing this because he wants to make America great again. He wants change. He wants America to be the shining city on the hill again. And you guys won't let him. You guys are afraid of that. So Kamala Harris is running on change, but she can't get her messaging right. She had a little friendly fire this week on The View, where Sunny Hostin on The View tried to press her on how you're going to be different from Joe Biden. How are you going to bring the change? Or can we expect the same change from you as we got from the hopey changey guy? Is that what we're going to get from you? The same type of change? And that's absolutely what you're going to get. That's why I'm doing these podcasts.
Well, if anything, Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in
Nothing
terms
comes
of,
to mind.
And I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
I would have done nothing different, and I've been part of most of the decisions right there. That she's basically saying that she is going to be Joe Biden's second term. She's going to be a continuation of the Bush-Clinton dynasty. You will get no change. The hopey-changey stuff that Obama promised and never brought to the country, that is the exact thing that you can expect from Kamala Harris. She was on with Colbert later on that night. Again, she gets a second bite at the apple. Again, she says, no change. There's not going to be any change.
Of course.
Polling shows that a lot of people, especially independent voters, really want this to be a change election, and that they tend to break for you in terms of thinking about change. You are a member of the President administration. Under a Harris administration, what would the major changes be, and what would stay the same?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm obviously not Joe Biden.
I noticed.
And so that would be one change in terms of.
Yes.
But also, I think it's important to say with 28 days to go, I'm not Donald Trump.
It's not enough.
And so when we think about the significance of what this next generation of leadership looks like, were I to be elected president, it is about, frankly, I love the American people, and I believe in our country.
Jeez.
I love that it is our character and nature.
No change. So no change. There isn't going to be any change. Later on The View, they start making the case because she says, well, one of the changes is that I would have a Republican in my administration. How's that different? How's that different? It may be different from Joe Biden, but Obama had a Republican in his administration. Obama had Robert Gates as his defense secretary, Republican. This guy was director he was assistant director of Central Intelligence during Iran-Contra. When they were shipping the cocaine, Central American cocaine, into the United States in the 1980s and fueling the crack cocaine epidemic, this guy was running it, Robert Gates, and then became director of Central Intelligence under George Herbert Walker Bush. And then he became defense secretary under George Bush. And Obama kept him on as the defense secretary when Obama came in. So, I mean, I don't understand how that's changed. People trying to make the case, well, she did answer the question. She said that she would have a Republican in her administration. Who cares? Liz Cheney? Adam Kinzinger? How's that change? That's straight up status quo. I mean, she's being endorsed by Dick Cheney, people. There's not going to be any change. So we've also been talking about the deregulation that these guys did in the 1990s that set up the housing crisis, that set up the Great Recession and the banking and subprime crises that happened in 2007 and 2008. Bear Stearns was the first bank to fail and got exposed with all of these derivatives. But there were many banks that were exposed. Lehman Brothers later declared bankruptcy. It was a huge failure. And like I said, this happened in 2008 when Bear Stearns failed in March of 2008. You're in the middle of the 2008 presidential race. That's in the primary when Barack Obama's running against Bill Clinton's wife, Hillary Clinton, and he's tying them back to Wall Street. He's saying that Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton represent Wall Street, and Barack Obama's blaming these guys: Robert Rubin, Larry Summers, Alan Greenspan, Timothy Geithner. Let's not forget Timothy Geithner and all of the deregulation that they did in the Clinton administration, and he's tying Hillary Clinton to that. And we're going to look here in a moment at a lot of things that Obama said in 2008 when he was running. Let's not forget also about the secret document that they were passing around in the last few months of the Clinton administration, while Larry Summers was Treasury Secretary. Robert Rubin had already resigned. Alan Greenspan was the Fed chair, and he had become Fed chair during the Reagan administration. He was the chairman of the Federal Reserve under Reagan, under George H.W. Bush, under Bill Clinton, and then under George Bush, 4 presidents. This guy was the head of the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve was fueling all of this. The Federal Reserve, this guy was the mastermind, and he was the one leading all of it. Alan Greenspan. So we talked about this document that was going around in the last few months of the Clinton administration. It was drafted in secret, passed around in secret. It was retrieved about a decade later through a FOIA request from NPR. And this document is titled Life After Debt. And it was predicting that the United States was going to be completely debt-free in 12 years. At this time, under these guys and under the Clinton administration in the late 1990s, we were at peace, which had a big part to do with the prosperity we were experiencing, because we weren't off fighting all of these stupid wars, or even as we were in the Cold War, building up our military. The Cold War was over, so we started pulling back on some of that military funding, putting it into paying off our debt. We had balanced budgets. We had surpluses. We had a roaring economy. A lot of that roaring economy was fueled by this guy, Alan Greenspan, with his interest rates and the deregulation. But I mean, the times were good. We could have done with a little bit more regulation, and that would have prevented what happened in 2008. But these guys set it up. They not only did all of the deregulating, they prevented anyone else, like Brooks Born, from regulating some of these securities that ended up taking down our economy, almost taking down our economy in 2008. When this document, I continue to tell you, when this document was drafted, Life After Debt, during the election in 2000, when Bill Clinton was leaving office and George Bush was coming in, George Bush was running against Bill Clinton's vice president, Al Gore, during this time. And this document, if this was the case, and the United States was going to be completely debt-free in 12 years, this should have been part of that campaign, but it wasn't. This was a document that was kept in secret. And during this time, the national debt was about $4 trillion. $2 trillion of it was Social Security obligations. And what it is now is 35, almost $0.7 trillion. And we just hit 35 about 6 months ago, trillion. We've been adding $1 trillion to our national debt every 6 months. So this crisis that they foresaw in 2000, and that they said that they needed to do something to avert this crisis, they obviously took care of that. So we were talking about the bank bailout and TARP, the Troubled Assets Relief Program, that Congress allocated or approved $700 billion for the Treasury Department and Federal Reserve to purchase commercial and residential real estate obligations, and then also the securities like the collateralized debt obligations, but also the synthetic CDOs. And the synthetic CDOs were the derivatives. We talked about that in the last podcast. We talked about how Brooks Born attempted to regulate these derivatives from the agency that she ran in the 1990s, and she was blocked by these men from regulating these complex securities that ended up almost taking down our economy. Tim Geithner as well. They blocked Brooks Born from regulating these instruments. I have a few more clips from the warning that I want to play. Let's take a listen to this one.
And that's what frightened Bourne more than anything. Trillions of dollars, and the biggest banks in the country operating in secret. If something went terribly wrong, the high-stakes derivatives market could take down the entire financial system.
So that's what happened. These derivatives ended up taking down or almost taking down the entire financial assistance. Taxpayers ended up having to bail a bunch of people out. But Brooksley Born was trying to regulate these in the 1990s because she feared that these derivatives could eventually take down the entire economic system. And 8 years later, 10 years later from her attempting to regulate these things after the Bankers Trust scandal, the long-term capital management scandals that exposed how dangerous these derivatives were in the late 1990s. Again, Warren Buffett called these financial instruments financial weapons of mass destruction in 2002. Brooksley Born wanted to regulate these things, and she was blocked.
Banks and hedge funds all over the world.
And that's what frightened Bourne more than anything. Trillions of dollars, and the biggest banks in the country operating in secret.
Operating in secret. It was a black box. Black box, completely unregulated, and these guys unregulated. All right, here's a little bit more of the warning.
As Rubin was quietly preparing the working group, Bourne was taking the first steps toward regulating OTC derivatives, designing a document known as a concept release. In response, Rubin acted, calling an emergency meeting of the working group.
We're driven there, and we get out at the entrance to the Treasury, go up to the room. Everybody assembles. The secretary walks in. The meeting is called to order. And the subject of the meeting was to discuss the concept release, and the clear mission of it was to convince Brooksley that it shouldn't be issued.
What's amazing is that Rubin and Greenspan said, no, you can't do that. We just can't have this. And it got pretty nasty pretty quickly.
Those on the other side were saying, look, this deregulated market is part of what's brought us the boom times. And so we don't want to change that. You know, the market will take care of everything. And we really don't need regulation of these. And in fact, it would be counterproductive.
Each of the principals in turn, that is to say, Rubin, Greenspan, and Levitt, take their shot at telling Brooksley that she shouldn't do what she's doing.
Levitt is the head of the SEC, and they keep talking about this working group. The working group is the men that I've told you about: Alan Greenspan, Robert Rubin, Larry Summers, Tim Geithner, and then also the head of the SEC, Levitt.
Rubin says to her, you don't have the legal authority to do this.
And Brooksley said, oh, that's interesting. That's the first time I've ever heard that. All my lawyers at the CFTC have assured me that we have the exclusive jurisdiction to do this.
Rubin was condescending toward her. He said he would get his lawyer in the department to help her understand the laws better, something like that.
SEC Chairman Arthur Levitt had been personally lobbied to join the effort to shut Bourne down.
This tight-knit group persuaded me that we really would face a situation of financial turmoil if we tried to undo these existing contracts.
And then it was Alan Greenspan's turn.
I happened to be sitting behind Brooksley and behind Greenspan. They're sitting next to each other. Greenspan turns to her, she turns to him. His face is red, and he's clearly quite upset. He was very adamant that this was a serious, serious mistake, that it caused untold damages to the financial services market, and that she should stop.
Listen to what Greenspan is saying, that regulating these instruments that eventually almost took down our economy and caused the Great Recession and people losing their jobs and recession and all this stuff. Greenspan is telling a decade earlier Brooksley Born that you can't regulate these things because it's going to harm the economy.
Very adamant that this was a serious, serious mistake, that it caused untold damages to the financial services market, and that she should stop and not do this, that it was unwise and would cause tremendous damage.
In a group of this kind, there will be a disparity in power, And it would take an extraordinarily outspoken, knowledgeable, pugnacious person.
I would vote for a woman.
The losing battle against
People, it's funny because they're saying that men don't want to vote for a woman. That's why they're not. That's the accusation that Obama shamelessly made, is that people aren't supporting Kamala Harris because she's a woman. I guarantee you, if a woman like Brixley Bourne was running for president, I'd vote for her. I'd vote for Tulsi Gabbard, maybe. I mean, I definitely, I wouldn't think of Tulsi Gabbard the same way I think of Kamala Harris. If I didn't vote for Tulsi Gabbard, it may be for some policy issue, but I don't think that Tulsi Gabbard's dumb. I don't think that she's evil. I don't think that Tulsi Gabbard is you know, I don't think I don't think that she's like Kamala Harris, and neither is Brixley Bourne. And was she? She was a woman of courage that went against very, very powerful men. That if she was successful in regulating these things in the 1990s, it could have prevented what happened in 2008.
An extraordinarily outspoken, knowledgeable, pugnacious person to fight the losing battle against the titans who led that group.
It's the education of Brixley Bourne. They decided that, hey, she's not playing ball. We're going to teach her a lesson. And we're going to get this thing killed because we don't want it to happen.
But 2 weeks later, Bourne told her staff to publish the concept release.
That creates an earthquake. You're talking foundation of the building. And she is literally in the crossfire of an amazing number of bullets.
The response of the working group was immediate and unprecedented.
By the afternoon, Rubin, Greenspan, Leavitt put out a statement saying, this is a very bad thing, and Congress should act with all deliberate speed to block it.
We have grave concerns about this action and its possible consequences. We are prepared to pursue, as appropriate, legislation that would provide greater certainty concerning the legal status of OTC derivatives.
The powers that be in Washington put out the word to the media, and they put out the word to Capitol Hill that her views were not to be trusted, they were not to be taken seriously, that she was running a podunk agency. This was a power grab, and she didn't have a clear understanding of the products that she was going to regulate and shouldn't be entrusted with that kind of power. And it would be a great mistake if she were.
Hearing of the Senate Agriculture Committee is now called to order.
Only Congress had the legal authority to stop Bourne. Rubin, Greenspan, Summers, and Leavitt lobbied hard.
Today we will receive testimony on over-the-counter derivatives.
Hearings were held almost immediately in both the House and the Senate.
Brixley is a lady, and the men were gentlemen, but the feelings were quite intense. This was an enormous embarrassment to the executive branch because they couldn't coordinate with each other.
Who's the executive, people? This is an enormous embarrassment to the executive branch because the Treasury Secretary's under the executive. The agency that Brixley Bourne ran was under the executive. So it's an embarrassment to the executive because the executive needed to pick a side. Who was the executive? This guy right here. William Jefferson Clinton was the executive. Did he pick a side? No, he didn't pick a side. Well, he did pick a side, but not publicly.
The feelings were quite
intense. He definitely didn't back Brixley Bourne to regulate these things.
This was an enormous embarrassment to the executive branch because they couldn't coordinate with each other.
There are a ridiculous number of congressional hearings.
Essential that the government not create uncertainty.
CFTC wants to come into somebody else's yard here.
She just gets pummeled on Capitol Hill.
I see no evidence whatsoever to suggest that this is a troubled market. That fraud is rampant.
How much were you getting, Graham?
Of regulatory uncertainty over a
thriving market.
The CFTC's action has and will bring, I believe, significant disruption to this important global market.
It serves no useful purpose, hinders the efficiency of markets to enlarge.
All the regulators there testifying, and all of them say this is a bad idea, this is a bad idea, this is a bad idea, this is a bad idea. And then she says this is a good idea, and the senators and congressmen just beat her over the head.
I feel very strongly that we should not have one agency innovate in this area, and in doing so, create very substantial financial problems.
Yeah, Graham, very substantial financial problems came just a decade later that could have been prevented if you had allowed Brooks v. Bourne to regulate these instruments.
90% of the members of Congress couldn't have told you what a derivative was. So all they knew was that these guys on Wall Street, some of whom make big campaign contributions, many of whom seem very smart, say if we do this, it'll screw up the economy.
My question again is, what are you trying to protect?
We're trying to protect the money of the American public.
We're trying to protect the money of the American public, is what Brooks v. Bourne said. So she was blocked during the Clinton administration. So a decade later, let's go back to George Bush. So the deregulation, these guys deregulated everything, wouldn't allow Brooks v. Bourne to regulate these instruments in the 1990s. Then Bush comes in, and then Bush creates the housing bubble. The American Dream Down Payment Assistance Program, where he creates this initiative to where he wants to get all of these minority homeowners into homes, into the home market. He was going to give them down payment assistance, just like Kamala Harris. He wanted the mortgage companies to remove the fine print from the contracts. He wanted them to streamline the loan process, to create creative financing and creative ways to finance these people. He wanted to get 40,000, says right here, initiative which is aimed to helping approximately 40,000 families a year with their down payment and closing costs to strengthen the housing market. George W. Bush created the housing bubble. He created it after and I told you how Alan Greenspan's the continuity. George Bush here giving him Presidential Medal of Freedom award. He was the continuity. He comes in. He's in the Clinton administration. They do all the deregulation. Then he comes in. He's still Fed chair while George Bush is president. 9/11 happens, and he's Fed chair when George Bush is creating the housing bubble. And these derivatives that ended up almost taking down our economy in 2008 were mortgage-backed security derivatives, these synthetic CDOs. Listen to a little bit of George W. Bush in 2002 talking about how he wants to create this housing bubble.
But we also have got to bring others into the process, most particularly the real estate industry. After all, the real estate industry benefits when people are encouraged to buy homes. It's in their self-interest that we encourage people to buy homes. And so one of the things that I'm going to talk about a little bit today is how to create a sustained commitment by the private sector that will have a powerful impact. First of all, we want to make sure that we help work to expand capital available to buyers, and as I mentioned, overcome the barriers that I've delineated, as well as provide the education component. In other words, this is not just a federal responsibility. That's why I've challenged the industry leaders all across the country to get after it for this goal, to stay focused, to make sure that we achieve a more secure America by achieving the goal of 5.5 million new minority homeowners.
5.5 million new homeowners is eventually what his initiative wanted. 5.5 million new homeowners is what he said. And he's encouraging the lenders, the private sector to get after this initiative. Everyone wants to talk about predatory lenders during the subprime crisis and the housing crisis. No, they weren't predatory. They were acting off what the chief executive directed them to do. He told them to go out and find these minority homeowners and to create creative ways to finance them and to really get after it to achieve this goal that he set out in 2002. He's the predator. He told them to do it. George W. Bush. So that's the role that each one of these presidents' administrations played in the crash. The deregulating happened under Clinton. The bubble was created under Bush, and then here comes Obama. Now, in 2008, when the crash happened, Obama comes in and he's running on change. I'm changing everything. I'm changing from Clinton. I'm changing from Obama. I'm running against both of these guys because both of these guys are responsible for where we find ourselves now with this crash and having to bail out the banks. Obama said a lot. Just a few weeks after the Bear Stearns crash and then also after Lehman Brothers, he is in the middle of his campaign. He calls this a speech in Cooper Union. It's Obama's Cooper Union speech in March of 2008. I recommend listening to the entire thing, but we're going to listen to quite a bit of it right now. This is what Obama was selling in 2008 when he was selling his hopey, changey stuff in the midst of this financial crisis.
Now, this loss has not happened by accident. It's because of decisions made in boardrooms, on trading floors, and in Washington.
And in Washington. And in Washington. In boardrooms and in Washington. So he knows. He knows what happened in Washington. He knows it wasn't just on Wall Street and in boardrooms. It was also in Washington, okay?
Decisions made in boardrooms, on trading floors, and in Washington. Under Republican and Democratic administrations, we failed to guard against practices that all too often rewarded financial manipulation instead of productivity and sound business practices. We let the special interests put their thumbs on the economic scales. The result has been a distorted market that creates bubbles instead of steady, sustainable growth. A market that favors Wall Street over Main Street, but ends up hurting both.
All right, so there's that distinction. That's the first time that you're going to hear him say that today, Wall Street versus Main Street. He says it in the clip from yesterday, the rich and the wealthy versus workers. He understands this distinction between Wall Street and Main Street. And when he's running on change, he runs in 2008 in the midst of this crisis, he's advocating for Main Street. Main Street is 95% of the country. It's not invested in Wall Street. That doesn't make up the rich and the wealthy. His neighbors in Martha's Vineyard. Those are the Wall Street people, the rich and the wealthy. 95% of the country's Main Street, the workers. He understands that distinction. And he makes it several times, many times. But several times you're going to hear it in this podcast. But he makes this distinction many times in that campaign that he was running in 2008.
Favors Wall Street over Main Street, but ends up hurting both. Nor is this trend new. The concentrations of economic power and the failures of our political system to protect the American economy and American consumers from its worst excesses have been a staple of our past, most famously in the 1920s when such excesses ultimately plunged the country into the Great Depression. That is when government stepped in to create a series of regulatory structures from FDIC to the Glass-Steagall Act to serve as a corrective to protect the American people and American business. Ironically, it was in reaction to the high taxes and some of the outmoded structures of the New Deal that both individuals and institutions in the 80s and 90s began pushing for changes to this regulatory structure. But
so he's talking about regulation. Listen to what he's saying. That it was the regulatory structure that brought the failure. The deregulation is what he's talking about under William Jefferson Clinton. That this deregulation that these guys did, blocking Brooksley Born, not letting her regulate these derivatives. It was the deregulation, the regulatory structure that was the problem. So he's railing against Clinton, He's talking about Bill Clinton and Clinton's administration and the deregulation that was done, he said, under two administrations, Republican and Democratic administrations, is what he's saying. That's what he's talking about here. Deregulation and the regulatory structure.
Sensible reform that rewarded success and freed the creative forces of the market. Too often we've excused and even embraced an ethic of greed, corner cutting, insider dealing, things that have always threatened the long-term stability of our economic system. Too often we've lost that common stake in each other's prosperity. Now let me be clear. The American economy does not stand still, and neither should the rules that govern it. The evolution of industries often warrants regulatory reform to foster competition, lower prices, or replace outdated oversight structures. Old institutions cannot adequately oversee new practices. Old rules may not fit the roads where our economy is leading. So there were good arguments for changing the rules of the road in the 1990s. Our economy was undergoing a fundamental shift carried along by the swift currents of technological change and globalization. For the sake of our common prosperity, we needed to adapt to keep markets competitive and fair. Unfortunately, instead of establishing a 21st century regulatory framework, we simply dismantled the old one.
Dismantled
by a legal but corrupt bargain.
Dismantled the old regulatory system that was aided by a legal but correct. What is he talking about? The old regulatory system goes back to the 1930s after the crash in the late 1920s. Legislation like Glass-Steagall and stuff like that, that these guys got rid of. They got rid of Glass-Steagall. They got rid of many of the regulatory reforms from the Great Depression. And that's what Obama is talking about here. He says that instead of creating new regulatory 21st century regulatory reforms, we just got rid of the old ones, is what he says.
Instead of establishing a 21st century regulatory framework, we simply dismantled the old one, aided by a legal but corrupt bargain in which campaign money all too often shaped policy and watered down oversight. In doing so, we encouraged a winner-take-all, anything-goes environment.
Campaign money. Who got that campaign money? Who's he talking about? He's talking about William Jefferson Clinton got all that campaign money from Wall Street. That's what he's talking about. And he's talking about William Jefferson Clinton's wife, who was getting all that campaign money from Wall Street in the 2008 primary.
In doing so, we encouraged a winner-take-all, anything-goes environment that helped foster devastating dislocations in our economy. Deregulation of the telecommunications sector, for example, fostered competition, but also contributed to massive overinvestment. Partial deregulation of the electricity sector enabled market manipulation.
So
companies like Enron and WorldCom took advantage of the new regulatory environment to push the envelope, pump up earnings, disguise losses, and otherwise engage in accounting fraud to make their profits look better.
So he's railing against deregulation, all the deregulation from the Clinton administration. Listen to a little bit more of him here. Hold on.
But beyond dealing with the immediate housing crisis, it is time for the federal government to revamp the regulatory framework dealing with our financial market.
Regulation, regulation, regulation.
Our capital markets have helped us build the strongest economy in the world. They're the source of competitive advantage for our country. But they cannot succeed without the public's trust.
So he says a lot. You got to go and listen to this entire speech. Again, it's Obama's Cooper Union speech. Let's listen to a little bit more.
And that's why throughout this campaign, I've put forward a series of proposals that will foster economic growth from the bottom up.
Bottom up. And bottom up. So that's what I wanted. That's the money line right there. Bottom up. I will foster an economic environment that builds the economy from the bottom up. At this time, the economy's in shambles. I mean, we're on the verge of another depression at this point. They call it the Great Recession, but without the taxpayers bailing all these banks out, and without the Federal Reserve's response to institute negative interest rates, which he got. Without all that, this is going to be a economic nightmare. So, I mean, all of the pieces are on the ground. So he says he's going to rebuild the economy from the bottom up. This is another theme throughout his campaign that he says over and over again. Rebuild the economy from the bottom up, Wall Street versus Main Street, regulation. This is all part of his campaign.
Costs are rising, and it's not clear that we'll leave a legacy of opportunity to our children and our grandchildren. And that's why throughout this campaign, I've put forward a series of proposals that will foster economic growth from the bottom up.
Bottom up.
And not just from the top down.
And not from the top down. Bottom up, not top down. Let's go back. I have another clip here. We're going to go further into that. So this is Obama in 2008. Senator Obama as he's running. Take a listen.
We have to remember how we got here. Not so much to allocate blame as to understand the choices that are going to face the next president. Unless we update our 20th century regulatory framework for a 21st century global financial system, then we are going to continue to be vulnerable to this kind of situation. And I think
so. We need a 21st century regulatory system. Bring in the regulation. They messed up. They really messed up back in the 1990s when they failed to regulate everything. Elect me, and I'm going to bring in the regulation, is what he says. Here's more of Obama.
What I absolutely insist on, though, is that the same sense of urgency that we have about Wall Street, we have about folks on Main Street who have been struggling for a long time.
Wall Street versus Main Street. There it is.
One of the critical lessons, I think, that have to be learned by this is not only that we have to set up some rules of the road, some regulations that work to keep the system solvent and prevent Wall Street from taking enormous risks with other people's money, figuring that tails I win, heads you lose, where they don't have any risk on the downside. But the second thing that we have to learn is that if you think about how this all started, subprime lending, you've got homeowners who ultimately could not make payments on their homes. And that's an indication of the degree to which family budgets have been under huge stress for years now. And we haven't been paying much attention about it because the theory's been, well, as long as those at the top are doing well, prosperity is somehow going to trickle down.
Let me ask you this.
So prosperity, as long as those on the top are doing well, prosperity is going to trickle down. So when he talks about rebuilding the economy from the bottom up, he is a direct statement against trickle-down economics. He is rejecting trickle-down economics from Wall Street to Main Street. So prosperity trickling down from Wall Street to Main Street, from the rich and the wealthy to the workers. He is rejecting that. This is part of the change that Obama is promising in 2008, that he is going to rebuild the economy from the bottom up, and he's going to reject trickle-down economics that is top-down economics. This is his message. This is what he said over and over again in 2008.
Senator McCain, on economic policy, fundamentally agrees with George Bush. I mean, up until this recent crisis, as recently as March, when I was calling for a fundamental overhaul of the regulatory system on Wall Street, Senator McCain was saying I'm basically a deregulator. On taxes, he has wanted to continue Bush's policies and, in fact, wants to double down on them.
Just so you know, this is the other part of what he ran on in 2008 against the Bush tax cut. Bush tax cuts had a 10-year limit. They had an expiration date 10 years from when they were passed. And the Bush tax cuts, they were set to expire. They were passed in 2001, so they were they were ready to expire in 2011. When he was president, he extended them. He extended the Bush tax cuts. He didn't let them expire.
Senator McCain was saying I'm basically a deregulator. On taxes, he has wanted to continue Bush's policies and, in fact, wants to double down on them. So you've got essentially a continuation, when it comes to John McCain, of the policies of the last 8 years. He'll talk about earmarks, but that's not a fundamental shift in our basic economic theories.
Fundamental shift. This is what this guy's saying. He's saying that John McCain doesn't represent a fundamental shift in our basic economic theories. He's saying he does. That I represent a fundamental shift. Change. Change I'm promising is a fundamental shift in our economic theories. That's what he says.
McCain, of the policies of the last 8 years. He'll talk about earmarks, but that's not a fundamental shift in our basic economic theories. What I've said is we've got to completely reverse course.
Completely
we've got
change.
To have economic growth from the bottom up.
Bottom up.
And that means that
we need complete change. We need to completely rethink our economic theories. That we need to institute policies that grows the economy from the bottom up, not top down, not trickle down, but trickle up. This is what this guy's running on over and over again in 2008. Take a listen to this clip.
I'm wondering, A, what do you think happened? And B, sir, what are you going to do about it? Because there's got to be, this has to be the last straw.
Well, this has to be the last straw, is what Whoopi says about the financial crisis in 2008. This has to be the last straw. We have to rein in these rich and these powerful people that you work for there on ABC Disney. We need to rein them in, and this has to be the last straw.
I'm wondering, A, what do you think happened? And B, sir, what are you going to do about it? Because there's got to be, this has to be the last straw.
Well, look, first of all, J.P. Morgan is one of the best managed banks there is. Jamie Dimon, the head of it, is one of the smartest backers we got. And they still lost $2 billion in counting, precisely because they were making bets in these derivative markets. We don't know all the details yet. It's going to be investigated. But
it's going to be investigated, is what he says. We don't know all the details yet. It's going to be investigated. He's going to be the next president of the United States. It's going to be his job to investigate it.
We passed Wall Street reform. This is the best, or one of the best managed banks.
Right.
You could have a bank that isn't as strong, isn't as profitable, making those same bets, and we might have had to step in. And that's exactly why Wall Street reform is so important.
Why Wall Street reform is so important. We need reforms. Wall Street reform. He's running on it over and over again. This is him on the Senate floor during the debate about the bank bailout. Let's listen to him.
Now, the fact that we're even here voting on a plan to rescue our economy from the greed and irresponsibility of Wall Street and some in Washington is an outrage. It's an outrage to every American who works hard, pays their taxes, and is doing their best every day to make a better life for themselves and their families. And understandably, people are frustrated and they're angry that Wall Street's mistakes have put their tax dollars at risk, and they should be. I'm frustrated and angry too. But while there's plenty of blame to go around, and many in Washington and Wall Street who deserve it,
plenty of blame to go around. Many in Washington and in Wall Street is what he says. Washington and Wall Street, plenty of blame to go around. Those in Washington and Wall Street.
all of us have a responsibility to solve this crisis because it affects the financial well-being of every single American. There will be time to punish those who set this fire, but now's not the time to argue about how it got set, or did the neighbor sleep in his bed, or...
There will be a time to punish those who set the fire. And the time to punish those that set the fire is going to be when you are president of the United States, when you win the election and you are sworn in. You are the person who is going to be in charge of punishing the people that set the fire. And in the next podcast, I'm going to tell you what this guy did once he got elected. The change that you got. Because it's going to be the same change you're going to get from Kamala Harris if you fall for that. I have a few more clips of him campaigning in 2008 real quick that I want to play, just reiterating this. It's like beating a dead horse at this point, but I just want you to hear it.
Now, we also have to crack down on predatory lenders and have better regulation to make sure that this problem is not one that continues on into the future. And making sure that credit markets and banks are operating in an honorable way in our communities is critically important, and I know a lot of you locally are working on those issues. That's step number one. Step number two, I think that now is the time for us to provide an additional tax stimulus to help not only get the economy going, but also help provide some relief to local families. So what I've said is, let's give another round of tax relief, a couple of $100s in people's pockets to absorb rising costs of gas and food. And I want a permanent $1,000 tax cut for every family to offset their payroll tax, because the truth is that even before this recession, working families were not benefiting from a growing economy. Most of it was going to the wealthiest Americans. It wasn't going to your constituents. And that's something that I think has to be reversed, because our economy grows best when it grows from the bottom up.
Our economy grows best when it grows from the bottom up, from Main Street to Wall Street, not from Wall Street to Main Street, from the workers to the rich and wealthy, not from the rich and wealthy to the workers.
The times are too serious. The stakes are too high. People will not be hoodwinked. You will not be bamboozled.
The hoodwink and bamboozled, this line comes from the Malcolm X movie with, what's his name, that Spike Lee did. So he's using the Malcolm X line, you won't be hoodwinked or bamboozled. And that's exactly what we were, bro. You hoodwinked us. You bamboozled us. Absolutely you did. And it's interesting that you're sitting here saying that we won't be hoodwinked and bamboozled while you're hoodwinking us and bamboozling us. A little bit more here. Take a listen.
Stop the pain. Stop the hurt. We can't screw it up any worse than they did. We cannot afford 4 more years of an economic theory that says we should give more and more to billionaires and millionaires. Hope prosperity trickles down on everybody else. We can't afford 8 more years of economic policies that put Wall Street before Main Street and end up hurting both. We need policies that grow our economy from the bottom up.
We need policies that grow our economy from the bottom up, huh?
I can take 2 more weeks of John McCain's attacks, but the American people can't take 4 more years of the same old thing.
Look at the signs they're holding. Change we need. Change, 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 change. We can't take the same old things. I'm going to bring the change. I'm going to radically change our economic system. I'm going to rebuild the economy from the bottom up. I'm going to bring the change, is what he says.
It's time to turn the page.
Turn the page. Who says that?
8 years of economic policies that put Wall Street before Main Street, but ended up hurting both. We need policies that grow our economy from the bottom up.
We need policies that grow our economy from the bottom up. We need policies that grow our economy from the bottom up. Now, on Monday, I'm going to show you what this guy did when he got into office. I'm going to show you the change that he brought, how he changed it, how he implemented policies that grew the economy from the bottom up. The economy was in shambles at this time. And one of those streets, Main Street or Wall Street, recovered first. Who recovered first under Obama? Was it Main Street or was it Wall Street? We're going to talk about that on Monday. I'll see you on Monday.